Okay.
Nanotechnology is the way of the future.
A way of wirelessly transmitting information into the human body using organic electronic components. You can put the patches on the human body, you can see an effect.
Soccer player David Beckham is arguably the most recognized athlete in the world, and even he's wearing the patches. The world's windsurfing champion clearly wearing the patches on his knees. Sean May wearing the patches when he was the MVP for the NCAA champions. Here's a national champion weightlifter using the patches. Esquire magazine ranked them as Performance Enhancer of the Month. ESPN the magazine did an article on the Lifewave phenomenon.
You know, last night we showed you that even Pop wasn't quite sure just what those bandages are on Tim Duncan's chest, but our viewers knew the answer. They're called Lifewave Energy Patches, a revolutionary new medical discovery.
It's so new, so great, so wonderful. How do you measure it? There is an immediate autonomic nervous system response within 5 minutes, and that is powerful scientific information to offer.
I've been doing this kind of testing now for almost 8 years, and I can tell you, you don't see these kind of results in 1 or 2 weeks.
There are a lot of products out there, folks, but there are very few companies who support their products with quality science.
We tested the Lifewave product and we found that it made a significant change within 10 seconds in the cytoskeleton. And let me tell you, that is profound.
So this is not so much a stimulant, okay, as more of a way to balance the body and bring the body back into harmony.
That which seems extraordinary today will be commonplace in the future.
When I got them, I tested them. I took it for what they said on the phone call to me that they would work, and I absolutely tried them out, and they did.
This is a new technology to provide people with energy, well-being, improved sleep, improved skin quality, relief of pain, relief of discomfort, and you just can't stop the truth.
Okay, so that was exciting. So how's
John, I saw there at one point it called itself a Class 1 medical device. Have they actually gotten FDA approval for this patch?
All of the patches have FDA approval. All of them do.
As devices?
Yes. Wireless technology is what they call it.
Then why can't we make medical claims if they're FDA approved?
Well, it's just that it's not. It's just that it can't. It's treat, prevent, cure disease. So as soon as you put the word disease in there, they're not going to approve that. No, because it's not that. It's a general wellness patch. So
it's what they're approved for.
Well, as that is something that can improve, basically improve vitality, energy, those kinds of things. And that's what I'm going to get into today. It's going to be really exciting. Okay, so
we don't need to say they're not FDA approved because they are then.
Right. Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the screen and bring this up. Okay, and if you guys could mute yourselves, that would be great. Okay, so here's the first slide. Okay, so yeah, so we're talking about energy today. So these are some ways, of course, we know how to get energy in the body with some basic things like going for a walk. So in experiments conducted by Robert Thayer, PhD at California State University, a brisk 10-minute walk not only increased energy, but the effects lasted up to 2 hours. And when the daily 10-minute walks continued for 3 weeks, overall energy levels and mood were lifted. So that's a good thing. Another thing is to take a power nap. I don't do many of these, but actually after reading this research, I may start. Research has shown that both information overload and pushing our brains too hard can zap our energy. But studies by the National Institutes of Mental Health found that a 60-minute power nap can not only reverse the mind-numbing effects of information overload, it may also help us to better retain what we have learned. Reducing stress. Stress from anxiety can leave you mentally and physically exhausted. I've known that one very much lately. even if you've spent a day in bed. More commonly, he says, low but chronic levels of stress erode energy levels. So over time, you find yourself doing less and feeling more. Here's a couple more. So drink more water. This I do pretty well now because I'm using these patches. It's easy to confuse signals of hunger with thirst. We think we need food when we really need water. Thirst can also masquerade as fatigue. So when I do forget to drink water during the day, it's exactly what I feel, is that fatigue is coming on. So, and eat more whole grains and less sugar. When you're eating a sweet food, you get a spike in blood sugar, which gives you an initial burst of energy. That's followed by a rapid drop in blood sugar, which in turn can leave you feeling very wiped out. It's the sugar spike. We've all done that, and it picks us up for a while, and then the pendulum swings back the other way, and then we're more tired. So a couple other things that are important if you're doing healthy things like these 6 points, and you're still feeling a big lack of energy, you should check your thyroid function and complete blood cell count. Okay, so it certainly won't provide an instant boost doing this, but if you're constantly low on energy, especially if you feel sluggish even after a good night's rest, you should talk to your doctor about a blood test for thyroid dysfunction as well as anemia. Okay, and you should check to see if you have mineral deficiency. So some essential minerals include magnesium as magnesium aspartate, selenium, chromium, and copper. And some important enzymes include bromelain, that comes from pineapples, papain from papaya, and other citrus bioflavonoids. So those will actually help to keep energy in your body. Okay, so all the cells in the body need chemical energy. So the chemical energy used for most cell processes is carried by ATP. Molecules in foods store chemical energy in the bonds. So you see these little hexagons here and these little things here. This is kind of what a starch molecule looks like. And inside this hexagon, this is what the glucose molecule looks like. Okay. So organisms break down carbon-based molecules to produce ATP. Carbohydrates are the molecules most commonly broken down to make ATP, not stored in large amounts, and up to 36 ATP from one glucose molecule. So basically, you see these, this over here, these are phosphates. This is a triphosphate with the ATP, and then there's a diphosphate, and that has just 2 phosphates. So this kind of chemical interaction is going on, of course, in our bodies all the time, in our cells. There's actually a cycle of this going on and on, which looks like this. So ATP transfers energy from the breakdown of food molecules to cell functions. Energy is released when a phosphate group is removed. ADP is changed into ATP when a phosphate group is added. Okay, so as you can see in this here, going this way, clockwise, so here's the ATP, and when a phosphate is removed, that releases energy for cell functions. And then as it turns into ADP and starts going the other way, then a phosphate is added, and energy from breakdown of molecules causes it to store energy. So energy is stored when a phosphate is added, and energy is released when a phosphate is removed. Okay, fats store most of the energy. So 80% of the energy in, your body, and about 146, this is an important number, 146 ATP from a triglyceride. Okay, because I'm going to talk a little bit more about ATP later. And why this number kind of comes into play. And proteins are least likely to be broken down to make ATP. Amino acids, which are basically building blocks for proteins, are not needed much for energy. About the same amount of energy as a carbohydrate. So if you look at this little chart here, carbohydrates and proteins, they produce about 4 calories per milligram. whereas lipids or fats are twice that, 9 calories per milligram. So this one over here, I remember this one from my biology class, barely. But yes, cell energy, photosynthesis, and respiration. Energy for living things comes from food. Originally, the energy in food comes from the sun. And this is really how important it is for living things, including us, to get sun. So this is the thing that we see up here on the surface of the planet. But as we can see in this over here to the right, a few types of organisms do not need sunlight and photosynthesis as a source of energy. Some organisms live in places that never get sunlight. So this is called chemosynthesis, and chemical energy is used to build carbon-based molecules. And then this is similar to photosynthesis, but it relies on this chemical thing to happen. So it uses chemical energy instead of light energy. So this is a kind of a picture of a volcano at the bottom of the ocean, and basically it's just pushing out a lot of dust and smoke and things like that. And actually the creatures that live down there can convert that into a carbon-based molecule, and they can live. So that's how they're able to do it without sunlight. Okay, so now we're going to talk a little bit about the Energy Enhancer Patch. Okay, we saw that all these athletes are using it, and my feeling is that you don't have to be an athlete or a dancer. Really, anybody should who feels like they need more energy, which a lot of people do, should use this patch. So what David Schmidt was quoted as saying is, what we have found through our research is that when energy enhancer patches are applied to the average adult, we are all different, but we're just talking about average adult, and they did this with this study with average adults that didn't have any preconditions or illnesses or anything like that, is that the ATP in the mitochondria is increased by 30% after just 1 hour. Okay, think of a battery getting a voltage boost by 30%, and that's quite incredible. So I'll just read a little bit about from this clinical study. There's also a link down here which you can find, and it'll go into it in many more pages, but I just pulled out the basic things. So results of this study demonstrate that Lifewave Energy Enhancer Patches produce a significant increase in performance for all but one of the tests of flexibility, strength, and endurance that were conducted. Although the absolute changes seem small for some of these tests, such as the weight strength tests, lat pull downs, for example, they are large changes when one takes into account the importance of lifting a weight that is only a few pounds heavier. The same conclusion is true for the stretch and reach test, using distance as the endpoint rather than the weight lifted. Furthermore, the increases observed with the active patch had a high level of significance, demonstrating the efficacy of the active patches in the tests. Factors that can influence the outcome were analyzed and found to have no effects on the outcomes. All of the subjects were properly randomized, as shown by the lack of difference between baseline measures between the active and placebo groups. Additionally, there was no learning effect that can occur as a result of repeating a test regardless of the length of the washout period. Okay, so these are, as we saw in the video, there's a few more here. Michael Phelps, eight gold medals at the 2008 Beijing Olympics, was wearing the patches. And David Beckham, back in 2005, threw his shirt off, and lo and behold, those patches were visible. And actually, the doping committee needed to find out what they were, and found out, of course, that they're non-transdermal. There's no chemicals or anything that go into the body, and so they're approved. And then we have this young lady over here who won an international marathon. Okay, so athletes for every sport imaginable have tried the Lifewave patches to gain an edge on their competition. This is something that, they've been around for a long time, but we see today that still a lot of people have never heard of them. So That's good for us. Okay, so there's a patching protocol, but there's different ones that I've tried. Philip has tried different ones as well. We kind of experimented with a number of them, but this is probably the most common, you know, right here. Lung 1 is acupuncture point located about 1 inch below the collarbone along the inside of the shoulder. And then there's the pericardium 6. It's located about 3 to 4 finger widths from the crease of the palm side, in the palm side of the wrist. And then there's the stomach 36, located in the depression, 4 finger widths below the kneecap and 1 finger width outside of the bone. Kidney 3, located at the depression on the inside of the ankle, just behind the ankle bone. And the triple burner 5, located in the middle of the back of the wrist, about 2 finger widths above the wrist crease. So basically, though, as you can see in this one, there's 2 patches, the tan patch and the white patch. Usually what they recommend is that the tan patch goes on the left side and the white patch goes on the right side for best effects. But I've actually experienced little variations on that myself that worked. Okay, so I'm getting down to the last little part of my, I'm going to talk about an athlete here and also an author. So I think we've all heard of Usain Bolt. He's the most decorated track and field star in history. And there's an interesting story that I heard at this convention in Las Vegas back in January of this year, where Phil M. Jones was giving this talk. And he mentioned this experience that he had with Usain Bolt. And so Phil he's what he calls himself as a student of success. So if he sees someone who's very successful, if he has an opportunity, he wants to find out why that person is so successful. So instead of saying wow, he says how. So he went up to Usain Bolt in an event. He wasn't racing that day, and asked him, "Mr. Bolt, I got a question for you." And Mr. Bolt was pretty nice and said, "Yeah, okay, go ahead." And he says, "Well, I just have this question. When you're down at the starting blocks and you're just before the race, just before the gun goes off, I'd like to know what's going on through your head. What are you thinking at that moment?" And so Usain, he paused for a little moment, seemed a little bit curious about that question. And he says, "Okay, well, I'll tell you. Well, first thing I do is I look right, and then I look left. And then I say to myself, I wonder why these other guys even bothered to show up." Okay, so Phil was a little surprised at that remark. He says, "This obviously is a very confident athlete." So he had another question, which is a more important question. And what he asked him was, "Mr. Bolt, it seems like when you're running the 100-yard dash, the last 1/3 of the race, it just seems like you're not even trying." And his answer was, "Well, every time before I run the 100-yard dash, I say in my mind that I'm going to run the best 110-yard dash of my life." And so what he's done there is he's run a different kind of race, okay? So that's why I titled this, "The Best of the Best Run a Different Kind of Race." And he basically, you know, decided to move the finish line, and thinking that in his mind, the mindset was to run a 110-meter race, not a 100-meter race, and that's what really separated him from these other world-class runners. Okay, so that is the end of my PowerPoint.